What's up, Tokyo? How are you? It's great to be here. I hope you're all kind of tuning in. The signal's not too bad. I'm so sorry we couldn't make it to the Blue Note in Tokyo, unfortunately, and I'd hoped to bring the trio together as well, but my drummer's in Lithuania right now, Marius Alexa, and my bass player is in Margate in the UK, so we're kind of all in separate places. So today I'm just going to do a very quick half-hour workshop and play a couple of solo tunes as well. But hopefully we'll be out there with you in October. The gigs have been rescheduled to October, so hopefully we'll be seeing you then at the Blue Note in Tokyo. But in the meantime, I'm going to play another tune, and I'm going to talk about different ways we can stay creative in this lockdown situation, because as it is an unprecedented time, I think there are ways we can use the current situation as a kind of means of staying creative and keeping ideas flowing, but I'm gonna play another old tune. This is called Chia. There it is. There it is. There it is. I'll tell you what, it's a funny thing performing without an audience, you know. But it's my technical assistant just helping out. I forgot to say I'm actually at my next door neighbour's house because my piano is locked up in my studio. So I'm my dear neighbours, and they've offered up their living room and their piano for me for this session. So I thought I would spend a bit of time just talking about ways we can stay creative in these strange times, because they are strange times, and I think the tendency can be to think that it's all a kind of lost cause, like all my gigs have been cancelled, and you know, musicians all over the world are really kind of, there's a sense it's going to be a struggle. And while that may be true, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we can use this kind of unique time to our advantage, because ultimately that's kind of the key, I would say, is trying to kind of find ways we can utilize the environment and make it more conducive for creating material. And so one way we can do this is collaborating. I actually just did a masterclass the other day with BIM in the UK with this amazing keys player called Hannah Vasanth, and she sent me a vocal, just the vocal on its own, and I then put keys underneath that vocal, and we created a whole song just from that one exchange. So she just sent me the vocal by itself, I put the harmonies underneath it, so that was a kind of version, and then I sent that back to her and she created a whole new version herself. And I think it was a kind of, we did this for the masterclass, and I think it was a sort of interesting illustration of what is possible now, because ultimately every single musician in the world is isolated and in their studios right now. So in a way, this is kind of a really unique opportunity to collaborate with whoever it is you want to collaborate with, because everyone's there in their studios, you know, and the speed at which we kind of had this exchange was really refreshing and illustrated that despite the isolation that we're kind of limited to, there's a lot you can do. So then Hannah took my keyboard arrangement away and made a whole new tune out of it. And now we're actually talking about working together again, and taking that particular song further and seeing where it might go. So I think it's, you know, it's kind of using the content, using the limitations as a means of creating. You know, like I suppose you could say the same about the internet. Initially, when streaming was taking off and no one was buying albums, the sense was that we're all doomed because nobody's buying records anymore. And while there's an element of truth in that, I think it's also true to say that the internet enables a means of getting your ideas out there in a way it never did before. So it's kind of trying to kind of turn these things on their head and find the positives in them. So collaboration is a big one. I think, you know, it's as I say, there are musicians all over the place right now who are ready to collaborate, and you can just send an idea to them and then they can put their thing on it and send it back to you, and this kind of dialogue is almost, I would say, easier than it was, because everyone is in one place right now and nobody can go anywhere. So that's first way to stay creative, is collaboration. Second way to stay creative is keeping your context fresh. So right now I'm working on a double cello concerto that I'm writing for the Metropole Orkest in Holland, which was due to be premiered at the Cello Biennale in October. We've got our fingers crossed that that's still all going ahead, but you never know. But I've never written a concerto before in my life, and to kind of take something on like that is a massive challenge. But it's also, it feels like quite a departure from where I've been exploring before. And so in changing the context within which I'm writing, I've found that it kind of yields a whole new approach to writing and to composition. I'm also working on a bunch of songs that are in a kind of Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen kind of style, which is a completely different thing. And I'm just doing it for fun, really. But I've found that in doing that, it's again a completely different genre and style, and I found it to be really liberating compositionally, because I've been writing at the guitar as well. So I think changing the context within which you're being creative, whether that's in terms of style or genre, or in terms of instrumentation. Like I say, I've been writing at the guitar, and because I'm not really a guitar player, I've found quite basic chords, but it sort of led me in a different direction. So I think changing those contexts can be a really useful thing, and it keeps it fresh as well, because that's really the key, is trying to kind of keep ideas fresh. And I think if you kind of get stuck with an idea, then I find just go away and find a piece of music that you love, and study it and work out why or how it's doing what it's doing, and be able to kind of analyze it. And I found whenever I've sort of hit a bit of a cul-de-sac creatively, if I just kind of take a breath, stop, come away from what it is I'm doing, and study another piece of music that has inspired me in the past, and see if that kind of opens up the kind of block, Another really useful thing I find to stay creative is imposing limitations. I think the struggle can often be when you have a blank canvas and there is nothing, there are no limitations, it's just a kind of anything goes. That's actually really hard to kind of start creatively. It's a hard place to start creatively from. And I think if you give yourself goalposts, then it can be really useful. I used to write lots of music for commercials, and I actually found it as kind of soul-destroying as it was as an experience. I found it to be really interesting, because the briefs were often sometimes they weren't very clear, but when they were clear, it was really easy to knock it out. So I would get a brief, say, that was something like a minute and a half of music that needed to be timeless, classical, and uplifting. And all of a sudden I've got a very, very clear brief, a very, very clear goalpost to aim for. And I think you can apply that to your own compositional work, or sort of practice, or whatever it is. Give yourself a specific target, give yourself a specific limitation, whether it's in terms of composition, limit yourself to writing, say, 3 chords. You just need 3 chords that loop around. Or limit yourself, when you're writing a melody, limit yourself to like 5 notes. Or when you're writing a drum groove, limit yourself to a specifically interesting time signature. And give yourself these kind of parameters within which to stay creative. Because if it's just all open and a blank canvas, then it can be really hard to kind of get a foothold. I think you need to give yourself footholds to cling onto. And then something I've realised that I do a lot in my writing is referencing personal experience, whether that's through human interactions or travelling. I'm actually writing the scores at the moment for the sheet music for Swift, my second record, and I've been doing a little, for each song I've done a little kind of introduction about the song and where the song originated and how it first came about. And I've realised in doing this that so much of my writing has started from travelling, and pretty much every one of those tunes from that album Swift was written either on the road with Snarky Puppy, or on tour with my own band, or just traveling on holiday. I find when I'm away and somewhere new, then my environment is constantly changing. When I'm on the move, I'd often write on a train or on the back of the tour bus or on a plane, where my environment is constantly changing, the language is changing, the smells are changing, the food is changing, the currency, the culture is changing, and that's where I was always kind of sourcing this change, this inspiration into what I was writing. So I think using your life experience. So right now, it's such a sort of strange and unprecedented time, but I'm working on an EP entitled Isolation, which is kind of looking at the different stages of emotions that we appear to be going through as an immediate community and a wider community. And maybe it starts with novelty, and then it turns into boredom, and then frustration, and then escape. But trying to source the things that are going on around you at that time. That's what I'm always trying to do, and how I kind of try to keep my ideas there and relevant. Just going back to the limitations thing, I wanted to reference a track called Denmark Hill, where all I did was I set myself the limitation of having pedal notes. So a pedal note being a repeating note in the bass. And what I love about a pedal note is that it kind of keeps the harmony anchored somewhere, and then it gives a whole degree of freedom elsewhere. As long as you have this reoccurring pedal note, then pretty much anything goes. So if I just play those chords by themselves, they're pretty, but without that anchored pedal note, suddenly they're kind of contextualized in a whole new way. And so this can go anywhere, and then you can change the pedal note. And suddenly, there's a freedom with what's going on top, because there's such a kind of regularity with what's going on in the bottom. And so it's kind of setting constants in one area that allow something to kind of contradict the constant in another area. So again, just setting a limitation. And so once I had that as a kind of harmonic colour, as it were, I tried to put a melody over it. The G is always there. Thinking in terms of a conversation when I'm writing. I'm trying to create a question and then have an answer. So question. Another question. Here's the answer. And that whole kind of exchange just came from setting myself the limitation of holding a pedal note. But I'm also, when I'm writing, I'm thinking melodically, I'm thinking in terms of very clear phrases. I find it really helps to sing a melody when you're writing it, because instinctively it sets, it creates a kind of grammar in your phrasing, because you run out of breath. And that's what we want, is to kind of have clear phrases. In just the same way, you would want to, when you're having a conversation and you have a clear kind of statement, you know, that has a sort of arc and a beginning, middle, and end, and then a kind of tail off at the end and a conclusion. And so, you know, phrasing is really important. And I'm often thinking about phrasing when I'm writing melodies and applying this kind of idea of a conversation. But also when I'm improvising, I'm thinking in terms of creating a dialogue with myself, you know, so like creating a question, you know, then an answer to that. Then another question, you know, then an answer. In terms of this, so you can be asking smaller questions within the phrase as well, and smaller answers, you know. So it's like, oh, you think this, I think that, you think this, you know, and just in the same way a conversation can evolve, you know, the solo can evolve, but always just thinking in terms of a dialogue, some kind of back and forth, some kind of exchange, sort of melodically, can be fun. The last thing I want to say about the staying creative, is, well, in relation to finishing ideas. You know, a lot of people have asked me in the past, like, how do you finish songs? That, you know, they get an idea to a certain point, and then it kind of they stall. You know, it's like, how do you get past that stalling? And I've suffered from this a lot. Everyone does. And so I think a way to kind of approach it is to ask yourself, what is working about the piece, and why is it that you've said, you know, this bit I like, and this bit now I can't get past this bit. So there's something about the song that is finished. There's something you are sort of convinced by. Okay. Okay, yeah, we're back on. Sorry. So find out what that is, and be able to isolate it, and then it's just a case of developing that idea further. So, for example, with December in New York, I knew I had this theme. About that far in the melody, and then I stalled, and I didn't really know where to go from there, so what I did was I asked myself what it is I like about that song up to that point, and I realized it was the kind of classical aesthetic that was going on. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and reinforce that classical aesthetic, and try to kind of evolve it, try and develop it in some way. So what I thought was, well, I'm in F minor. What's the classical thing to do when you're in F minor? Go to the relative major, which is A flat. But I thought, well, I'll go to the dominant of A flat, which is E flat. So when we get there, it sounds like this. There's someone at the door. Then we go to E flat. did there really was continue the sort of aesthetic, or the sense that I was this kind of classical aesthetic, you know. So I kind of honed in on what I liked about the song, and then I just kind of tried to evolve that further. So that's one thing to think about in terms of how to push through that that kind of writer's block, you know. Hone in on what it is you like about it, and try to kind of recontextualize those things, that elements, you know, those elements. Okay, so I'm getting loads of questions here. I'm going to play another tune, yeah, embrace this wonderful piano in the neighbours' community, and it's been a real treat to chat with you all. We're living in strange times, but as I say, I think this is whenever there are kind of unprecedented things going on, I think it's an opportunity to try to use them. I also think this is a really unique time to focus on the things that matter. You know, I feel like ultimately the world has kind of been crying out for us all to slow down a little bit, and it's finally kind of having its say. And for better or for worse, I think there are lessons we can learn from this whole process of, you know, what really is important in terms of family and friends. You know, we can still stay connected thanks to the internet, and I think it's also about taking stock right now. I'm meditating more, and I'm trying to kind of focus on, you know, being healthy in mind and in spirit. So I would encourage you all to use this time as an opportunity to kind of regroup and take stock in those things, and be kind to one another and look after one another. I'm going to sign out with this old favourite. Yeah, I hope to see you all so soon in October in the Blue Note in Tokyo. Fingers crossed that's all going to go ahead. And I'll be there with my trio, with Marius Alexa on drums and Jonathan Harvey on electric and upright bass. And we'll be playing material from my last studio record, Cables, which the studio album was just me on my own in the studio with a million different keyboards. But this version will be with the trio, so it'll be sort of trio arrangements of those songs from Cables, including a whole bunch of tracks from the most recent live record we just put out, live at Ronnie Scott's. So we hope to see you there. In the meantime, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. is. There it is. I want to just sign out with a message I want to pass on from the one of the true greats, Stevie Wonder, who I was lucky enough to meet a couple of years ago, and I was trying to wrap my brains as to what I could ask him. Like, it's kind of hard to really come up with a question for a guy like Stevie, and so I just said, I'm a young aspiring musician. What do you have any pearls of wisdom? And what he said to me, I kind of took away with me ever since, and has been the reason I get out of bed every morning since then. And I think it's particularly relevant now, because he said to me, we are the glue of society, and it's our role and responsibility to bring love and unity to the planet. And you know, I think the current situation we're in, that's really been illustrated. It's like people can't live without music and without the need to connect through music, because it is the glue. It's the glue of society, and it really does kind of bind us together. And I think when I fully realised that and appreciated it, it kind of made my pursuit in music feel much, I don't know, it felt like anything was possible in terms of having that aspiration and being aware of the power that music has in that way. So go forth and be the glue. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to see you all in Tokyo in October, and sending you lots of love from London. Stay safe and see you soon. Ciao.